Hello there, and welcome to Phil Talking D20. So, today's video is a combination gaming next level power fest, the likes of which you've never seen. Well, what are we doing? We are combining the power of the Advanced Player's Guide with the Dungeon Master's Guide for Pathfinder 2e. And using your imaginations, imagine there being a sign of two books flying at each other, colliding, massive explosion, like next level gaming shiz. So, what am I referring to specifically from both books? Okay, this is really, really funky. The Gamesmastery guide for Pathfinder 2e has this little secret snippet of joy, and it is called the Free Archetype, which, if you've obviously dabbled in the Advanced Player's Guide and Pathfinder 2e in general, means you know that archetypes are the multi-classing method that Pathfinder 2 employs, and that the Advanced Player's Guide has given us an absolute boatload of new ones. Ooh! So, the Free Archetype from the Games Mastery Guide is as follows. The only difference between a normal character and a free archetype character is that the character receives an extra class feat at second level and every even level thereafter that they can use to spend on archetype feats. Depending on the needs of the group and the theme of the game, you might restrict the free feats to those of a single archetype. Each character in a group has, for a shared backstory perhaps, those of archetypes fitting a certain theme, such as only ones from magical archetypes if the game was set in a magic school. It's entirely unrestricted if you so wish, just to create a higher powered game. Now, really simple. The core mechanic of that, at second level, and then every even level thereafter, you gain a free feat that you can just burn on archetypes. How do I want to use that? I hear you say. Well, check this out for an idea. So I ran a gaming world for my group where guilds and organisations had a big part to play in that. This was in Pathfinder 1. And the general gist of it was there's several members who were members of the local watch, the Night Watch, had a bit of a Terry Pratchett vibe of the world. There were some that were getting into kind of corporate and business interests and politics. And there were characters joining different kinds of guilds to get kind of different, levers to pull in the world. Now, there wasn't any kind of cool kickback mechanics that kind of gave their characters a steer or an advantage. There were the slightly complicated organisation rules that I think were in the Kingdom book, Ultimate Kingdom, or whatever it was called. But they had things like you could get like favors, and you could get kind of like, skill checks, bonuses and little things like that. If you put a lot of work into this mini game that kind of buffed and improved your status and the status of the organisation that you're a member of. However, I remember at the time being a bit kind of like, it's a bit of a kind of awkward, clunky mini game where I want something that's a bit more fluid and a bit more fast paced. And the general vibe of people doing favours for you and that little bit of give and take and money lending or money borrowing or those kind of things that the system also enabled were kind of just role play that you could do anyway. You didn't really need, once you really kind of just took the couple of things out of the core rules, you didn't really need those organisation rules. But what if we make all our organisations in a world part of a free archetype build? So the premise of this is it's a kind of more enriched, involved world experience for the kind of the player and their character in the game world. And the gist of it is as follows. Make sure you have organisations in your gaming world that they can join. The Mages Guild, the Wizards University, Fighters Guilds, all these kind of organisations that are quite common tropes of gaming, mainly because they were quite common tropes of the kind of the medieval period. So create those organisations, use ones that already exist within the Pathfinder lore. Obviously, the Pathfinder organisation is a good example of this. Go through this process of having some kind of thoughts on it. And then for each one, and going back specifically to the campaign world I ran, where the watch was a big factor, you would then be able to kind of say, all right, all of the gamers, to your gamers, you're all going to have free archetype. So, but the only way you can get access to archetypes is being members of organizations or guilds. And that's your pathway into kind of how your character gets these feats. At which point they are at liberty to do what they like. So there might be a fighter that joins the Mages University and starts, getting free archetype feats for wizard or sorcerer or whichever particular magical class took his fancy. With regard to the watch, the two that I immediately thought of off the bat were Bounty Hunter and Investigator from the Advanced Player's Guide. So you imagine being a character that's kind of engaged with the watch. Maybe they're a fighter, or maybe they're, I suppose a more standard, normal, not so skill-focused investigative class. But then they start bolting in perhaps Bounty Hunter or perhaps Investigator, and suddenly their class and their character and their roleplay and their kind of way in the world from that kind of, character kind of experience is being enriched because they're able to do more for their guild. They're able to invest more in their guild from a roleplay perspective. The guilds and the organizations start to really solidify as anchor points within your roleplay experience, which from a player perspective and a GM perspective makes the world more invested in, more enjoyable, and kind of more believable. You get that kind of level of investment from a player because they've suddenly kind of started liking the kind of the little quest arcs that these kind of guilds can kind of present to them in the form of kind of very simple kind of side quests, or even, if enough of a party have vested interests in perhaps an area, all those guilds have a similar vested interest in their area. They can all steer them onto the path of a group kind of mini campaign objective, which is forwarding all of their careers and all of their guilds and also all their class experience and everything else like that, and really kind of zooming in on kind of gravitating players to be more invested in actual things within the world, to get kind of wrapped up in and lost in the imagination copter, as Troy LaValle of the GCP likes to say. If you don't know who the GCP are, Glass Cannon Podcast. They're one of the kind of the big Pathfinder 2, Pathfinder 1 podcast guys. They're on Patreon, they're on Google anywhere you can get free podcasts, and then they have some kind of Patreon kind of paid kind of subscription area ones, which are also really good. So if you kind of want to get into some Pathfinder kind of podcasts and so forth, Glass Cannon Podcast, check the boys out. Now, where were we? Back to the talking point. Again, don't restrict it to just it's only one thing. Think about fighters guilds, all right? If you kind of go really generic kind of Morrowind, Oblivion, kind of bog standard fighters guild, then realistically, it's going to be a couple of the combat kind of schools based kind of archetypes. So fighter archetype, from the actual class fighter is an obvious one. Bastion, the person who's expert with shields. Things that are fairly straightforward and very kind of member of a fighters guild. But what if there was a Buddhist temple, like a Shaolin monk temple, up on a nearby hilltop, where you could go and study and train and gain access to monk? It's the same thing when we're starting to think about a combat fightery kind of school, but we're putting cool twists on it. There could be, a karate school just down the road, or an MMA gym or a boxing gym, and that could give you access to the martial artist archetype if you joined that club and took part in events there as a character. You can see how this free archetype that you would give everyone at the table gives players this sudden really kind of big pool of kind of creative ideas for things they might want to get access to. Again, we've already said Mages Guild. I'm going to go, be a wizard, Harry. You join a knightly order. Again, kind of like fighters guilds. You've got these kind of there could be all sorts of knightly orders. So you could end up being a cavalier, or you could end up, joining the Rangers Guild. you know, like a woodsman guild, and getting access to ranger and scout and the other archetypes that are presented in those kind of veins. So you've got these great kind of drop-in points for organizations, and then an incentive for players to invest in them and join them and discover them and take part in them as entities within your world, not only giving you quest points in terms of where player interest is focusing on their guild. You can push out some kind of, some kind of adventure path kind of side quest, if you like, kind of, creative kind of jump offs for them. But again, you can combine the guilds into our general area is important to us, and pull all of the party in to a joint venture between the guilds, because they need a group of adventurers to help kind of, protect their local area where they run their businesses, to go off and do something that's slightly more larger scale, slightly more kind of, big picture. If you want something that feels like it's a bit more sustained, maybe kind of, a little mini campaign of like 4 or 5 sessions, it's all buildable from that bedrock up. And the players are getting, sunk into it. They can find the guild that they want to join. They can join an organization. I like the idea of that kind of that mixed martial arts gym where you just get martial artists. That's all they'll teach you. That's a good one. So you've got this really great rule mechanic from the the Gamesmastery guide, the free archetype. For page reference, if you are, because there's a lot of stuff in the Gamesmastery guide, and I probably should do a review on it at some point, because my initial thoughts were it's a bit meh, but now I'm like, it's a bit ooh. That's obviously not the detailed review. You'd hope the video review of it will be slightly more in detail than ooh. But yes, so no, not level 0 characters, Phil. Free archetypes are on page 194 of the Gamesmastery guide. And then obviously you've got the archetypes presented in the core rulebook for the core classes. You've got a huge amount of archetypes that you can pick from and write little lists for different organizations in your world that you can lift out of the Advanced Players Guide. Don't quote me on this. I'm not sure if I'm correct or not. But I'm pretty sure there's some archetypes in the world guide, and I think there might be some class or archetype options also in some of the, like a Fall of Plaguestone, like some of the adventure paths. So again, you've got all sorts of organizations baked into the Pathfinder 2 fluff, but you can also create fun little homebrew ones, like Ken's Karate Bar, that teaches you how to be a martial artist. You've got it. There's the idea. Add it to your games. Get the guilds going. Get the free archetypes rolling. Get some really funky, cool characters. And don't worry about balance, because like I said, that's straight out of the Gamesmastery guide. So they're already kind of saying, look, we're fine with it. It's cool. You can do this. It's quite a fun idea. Obviously, in detail, they talk a little bit more about how characters can be not overpowered, but just a little bit more versatile than perhaps you might be used to as a GM, because they've suddenly got a second pool of kind of abilities they're starting to dabble in outside of their class because they're multi-classing. But from a perspective of balance, just keep a steady eye on it, and if they start to kind of, run away with things a little bit more than you're used to, bolster some hit points. Throw another monster in here or there, and that should sort it out with no bother whatsoever. One of the simple things that I often consider doing when I think they're getting to a point as a party where they're kind of getting a full head of steam up too easily in some of the fights that I've thrown at them that I thought perhaps should have been a bit more combat-y and slightly more challenging. Really simple one: maximize hit dice. You look at it from a perspective of, all right, well, this is how many hit points they've got going in. I'm going to, add, 2 more chunks of its base hit points in terms of if it's clearly running kind of, 10 plus 4 for its hit point pool. I'm just going to go, all right, I'll add another one of them on, another 15 hit points. I'll chuck another 20 hit points and see what difference that makes to staying power. Because when you're in that situation as a GM, this is, going to be important for referencing back to this. If you feel like you keep putting them up into encounters but they end too quickly, just have a quick look at kind of where you're expecting to be, how many hit points the targets the monsters you're using have got, and if they're simply dying too quickly for it to be kind of threatening or challenging, like I said, really simple fix: slap 10-20 hit points on, just off the bat. And then if it gets to a point where you've reached their normal hit points and they should be dead, and it's been a really great fight, have them die. If it has been a bit lackluster and perhaps they've beaten them to a pulp within seconds and the party are like, they've reached that point where the monster should be dead really easily, let it keep going. There's that little extra backup pool of hit points. And then at the end of it, hopefully, the combat's been a bit swingier, felt a bit more challenging, felt a bit more rewarding. I really don't see that being a problem, though, with these 3 archetypes, because the archetype system, you're not really changing a great deal. So I don't think it's going to be massive, but I do think it's going to present oodles of fun for players and for GMs in terms of creating organisations or using existing ones, writing down these little quick lists of what archetypes are available to join if you're a member of that organisation, and then letting it run and watching people kind of invest and grow organisations and kind of, movements and those kind of entities within your game world. So try it. I'm pretty sure you're gonna like it because it's cool. And that is the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Nice little quick fire. Here's the Advanced Player's Guide. It's really good. Here's something out of the Gamesmastery Guide. Slap them together. Homebrew extravaganza yet again. There you go. So, like, subscribe, leave me a comment. If you do use this and it's great, let me know. Because, like I said, I think it sounds fab fun. I'm going to put this in my next game, 100% guaranteed. The next game I run, free archetype, mini lists, organisations, all that nerdy fluff, well in there. So, yeah, enjoy it, and I shall see you on the next video. Peace out.